Hi guys. Today we're going to be learning about something called the discriminant. The discriminant is a way to tell what type of answer you're going to get when solving a problem, but it does not actually tell us the answer. It just gives us a little heads up about what we should expect when we do actually solve it. To find the discriminant, first you need to put your equation in standard form. Standard form for this chapter is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So just like on solving by factoring, it has to equal 0. And you do want it to be in descending order. X squared, x, just a number. The discriminant comes from the quadratic formula, which we will be learning about tomorrow, but you've probably already heard it from your Algebra 1 class. So I feel pretty confident putting it up there. Now for today, we're only going to use the part of the quadratic formula that is underneath the radical. We're not even going to use the radical sign, just the underneath part. So that's what is called the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. So again, that is the only thing that we'll be using today for our calculations, b squared minus 4ac. The b and the a and the c come from that standard form at the top of the screen. So the b is the number in front of x, the a is the number in front of the x squared, and then the c is the constant. When you're finding the discriminant, your answer is going to be a single number followed by a phrase. The phrase is what tells us what the answer would look like if we did solve the problem. The directions are going to ask you to state the nature of the roots. That's the phrase. Remember, we learned last week that roots is just a fancy word of saying solutions. And so the nature of the roots just means what kind of answer are you going to get? Are you going to get a nice pretty number? Are you going to get a crazy radical answer? Are you going to get an imaginary answer? That's what that means. So for today's problems, you're going to get two answers. You're going to get a number followed by a phrase. Let's make a chart about how to figure out what phrase to use based on the number that you calculate. This chart is similar to our chart for powers of I. So after you've calculated the discriminant, if you get a number that is a perfect square, something that you know the square root of, like 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, then there are two unequal, real, rational roots. So that's the phrase that you need to write. You'll need to memorize these phrases. So again, the way that we read this is we read the sentence at the top. When the discriminant is a perfect square, then there are two unequal, real, rational roots. Our next scenario, when the discriminant is any other positive number that is not a perfect square, like 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, then there are two unequal, real, irrational roots. The only difference between those two is rational versus irrational. In our second video, I'll explain a little bit more what those words mean. Our third scenario, when the discriminant is the number 0, like literally the number 0, then there are one real double root. And finally, when the discriminant is any negative number in the whole entire world, then there are two imaginary roots. So make sure that you copied this chart into your notes. And then let's do some problems. Again, the directions say find the discriminant. That means tell me the number that you get for the discriminant. And then state the nature of the roots. That means pick one of those four phrases. It's important to note that this problem is already in standard form. It goes x squared x number, and it's already equal to 0. From this equation, my a is 1, my b is -4, and my c is -5. I'm going to plug that into the discriminant formula, b squared minus 4ac. Now, on these equations, especially if you're relying on your calculator to do your calculations for you, it's very important that if your number is a negative number, that you surround it with parentheses and that you put anything that is not the number on the outside of the parentheses. So when I'm plugging in these numbers, I get this. Notice that the negative 4 is in a parentheses and the square is on the outside. I also put the negative 5 in a parentheses. If you write it out this way and you type it in your calculator exactly how I have it written, exactly, everything exactly the same, then your calculator will understand what you want it to do and it will give you the correct answer. If you do not type it this way into your calculator, specifically if you leave out the parentheses, your calculator will give you the wrong answer. So please make sure that you are surrounding your negative numbers with parentheses. Or, I mean, these numbers are not that big. We could totally do this without a calculator, right? Negative 4 squared, that's negative 4 times negative 4, that's positive 16. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. And negative 4 times negative 5 is positive 20. And 16 plus 20 is 36. So, I mean, we don't have to use a calculator. But again, if you are going to use a calculator, it's really important that you type it in the correct way. Your calculator only does what you tell it to do. So if you're not typing it in a way that it understands, it will give you the wrong answer. Okay, so that's my first answer. The discriminant is the number 36. Next, we need to choose which of the phrases we should use for this. So here I have a positive number, and there were two options for my phrase for positive numbers. So I need to go one step further, and I need to say that 36 is a perfect square. I know the square root of it, it's 6. So since this is a perfect square, I'm going to use my first option, which was two unequal real rational roots. So again, these are my two answers. The number 36 is my discriminant, and then I have my phrase. For the next problems, I'd like you to try them on your own. So see if you can figure out the discriminant and the phrase that goes with it. So please pause the video right now and try these three problems. Once you have all of your answers, go ahead and restart the video and we'll check them. All right, for that first problem, the equation was already in standard form, so hopefully you just plug the numbers in, and if you did the math correct, you should have gotten your discriminant is negative 44. When our discriminant is a negative number, the phrase is two imaginary roots. Two imaginary roots. For the second problem, make sure that you have the correct number for B and for C. In this problem, we are missing a term. Specifically, we are missing the term with the letter X. That means that in this problem, my letter B is 0. Since the X was missing, we'll use 0 for B. The negative 7 is C because the negative 7 is a constant. So make sure that you use the right numbers. If you did your calculations correctly, you should have gotten 140 for your discriminant. Now, if you are not sure if something is a perfect square or not, you can always type it into your calculator and see. So try to take the square root of it. If the calculator gives you a decimal answer, it is not a perfect square. If it is not a perfect square, then we choose our second option, which was two unequal real irrational roots. On our third example, it is not in standard form because it is not equal to 0. So I need to do a pre-step first. I should add the 5 to the other side. Now that it is in standard form, I can calculate my discriminant. And for this problem, my discriminant was the number 0. When you get an answer of the number 0, the phrase you use is one real double root. This is how to do the majority of tonight's homework. We will have a second video that talks about graphs.